I would say that our Riksbank is to be blamed for whatever nasty thing that happens to our economy in the future. Henrik Unell, Nordea Bank. So Henrik, Sweden's central bank have cut interest rates to minus 0.5%, taking the economy even further into negative territory. What is your assessment of this decision?
My personal assessment is that their policy is utter madness on a large scale, and the bank that I represent, Nordea, I guess their assessment is that it's madness on a smaller scale. But looking at the decision, it was softer than we had expected. We were going for minus 10 basis points, and they did 15. They also postponed the first rate hike in their rate path, and they lowered the end point. But they also opened up for a two-tier system similar to what we have in Japan and Switzerland. We were spot on there, though. And my comment on why it's utter and sheer madness is that we have an economy that is growing at the pace of 3.5%, with strong employment, elevated household lending, full-on inflation in property prices, etc., and add to that an undervalued currency. I would say that our Riksbank is to be blamed for whatever nasty thing happens to our economy in the future.
Okay, well, a recent HSBC report assesses the correlation between negative interest rates and the resulting escalation of property prices. Sweden is argued to be a prime example of this problem. What are your thoughts on the potential headache this presents?
I would say that they are, of course, correct in their assessment. Property prices in Sweden and the high level of household debt is driven mainly by reduced rates and the low cash flow it generates in terms of rate payments for households. If you had mortgage rates that were 2% higher, prices would be significantly lower. I would say that the Riksbank is a bubble maker, together with other policymakers such as the Swedish government, etc. But the high level of debt and property inflation year in and year out means that we have borrowed heavy from the future in terms of growth and consumption. And we could have a potentially brutal development the day property prices correct. And all that boils down to limited inflation targeting and the Riksbank only focusing on inflation on goods and not taking into consideration other parts of the economy. That's very dangerous business. It breeds instability elsewhere, and in Sweden's case, it's the property sector that eventually will take a hit.
Lastly, the Riksbank's inflation target is 2%, yet actual inflation stands at just 0.1% currently. If economists believe that low interest rates can fuel inflation, then why isn't this working as yet?
I would say that most sensible economists are highly in doubt when it comes to the ability of lower rates to generate inflation. We now have 8 years of empirical evidence that it just isn't so, although the central bank paradigm is still tilted in that direction. And that is what creates today's volatility in the markets, because central bankers imagine that there is a magical level on policy rates or a magical volume in QE that will create inflation and correct imbalances. I mean, the ultra-low CPI numbers, not only in Sweden but the whole Western world, that reflects the low demand in relation to overcapacity in global production platforms, but also, of course, the commodity bust and oil prices that just keeps on falling. There is nothing that the Riksbank can do about that. We don't have a demand problem in Sweden. Our GDP is tracking 3.5%. Lowering rates will only increase financial speculation, not real investment. And if you look at CPI in Sweden and you deduct energy prices, it's 1.3%, and that's about where core rates are all over the Western world. I think the Riksbank should accept the fact that we are living in new times, a new low inflation era, and realize the limits of monetary policy. And if Sweden and the Riksbank does not succeed in creating inflation, given our ultra-strong economy and weak currency, then it's futile for the ECB or the Fed or the Bank of England to even try.
Thank you, Henrik. Be sure to check back with the Dukascopy TV team for more updates throughout the week. Goodbye for now.